If you're a cyclist, the 2022 Commonwealth Games are the worst place to be right now. With multiple horrifying crashes over the course of just a few days, people are taking notice and questioning just how safe the games really are. In today's video, we're looking at exactly what went wrong, how spectators got involved, and who saw a painful end to their bid for gold. First up, the moment that had everyone shocked. Team England had a big role to play in the Commonwealth Games this year. The events are being hosted in their country, so all the teams had to deliver their best. Joe Truman went into Birmingham 2022 with similar high hopes, but he never expected his race to end the way it did. The cyclist suffered a crash straight out of a horror movie, tumbling down at 45 miles an hour. He was immediately knocked unconscious, making no sign of waking up, while Matthew Glaetzer of Team Australia lay next to him with his skin suit torn to shreds. Medical staff immediately rushed onto the track to try and revive Truman, who needed oxygen treatment as soon as possible. The crowd fell silent as they waited for the paramedics to do something before erupting in applause when the cyclist finally woke up and was escorted out on a wheelchair. He also suffered a badly shattered collarbone, while his teammate and former housemate Jack Carlin took home the silver medal. Carlin also expressed how worried he was to see his pal on the ground, but he's sure that Truman will be back and better than ever for upcoming competitions, including the Nations Cup and World Championships. Sir Chris Hoy from the BBC, who's won 6 high-speed Olympic gold medals in cycling, spoke out about the crash, explaining how close the riders have to be during the race. Glaetzer may have left Truman with nowhere to go, but the crash was in no way his fault. But Hoy also mentioned that this kind of incident was rare. That little comment didn't age too well, as we would see in the later events, because this was just the first of many. Matt Walls went into the men's qualifying 15-kilometer cycling scratch race hoping to bring back gold like every other cyclist in the velodrome. Unfortunately, there was a little snag in that goal. The Olympic Omnium champion was doing just fine until a horror movie moment where he crashed and ended up flying over the barrier, leaving several other cyclists tumbling down behind him with spectators covered in blood. The session was immediately suspended, and Matt Bostock, a competitor from the Isle of Man, was carried out on a stretcher. He received treatment inside the velodrome for about 40 minutes before being whisked away to the hospital for further emergency care. According to the hospital in London, though, he got stitches for his forehead and a few other minor cuts and scrapes, with no major injuries. The audience didn't do so well, with a man needing treatment for cuts to his arm and a young girl needing medical attention as well. But the most damaged of them all was the track itself. With 8 out of the 13 riders involved in the qualifier crashing, the first priority after everyone got medical care was repairing the track, with staff members rushing in to help. So how did it happen? Looking at the coverage of the event, it seems like New Zealand's George Jackson and Australia's Josh Duffy crashed as they took the corner, forcing Matt up onto the barrier and eventually over it onto the spectators. Canada's Derek G also hit the barrier but spared the crowd, and his fellow Canadian Matthias Guillemette was disqualified for apparently causing the initial crash. But the accidents at Birmingham 2022 were still far from over. With the third crash in 3 days, India's Meenakshi suffered the same fate as Truman and Walls. The cyclist was competing in the women's 10-kilometer scratch race until she was hit by a Welsh rider, causing her to fall over. New Zealand's Briony Botha got caught in the aftermath as she didn't react quick enough to Meenakshi's sliding across the track. The cyclist accidentally ran her over with her cycle, making things much more horrific than they already were. It looked less Commonwealth Games and more Hunger Games, as both riders were attended to by medics, with Meenakshi being carried away on a stretcher and Botha able to walk on her own. But finally, competitors are speaking out. The women's scratch race left Meenakshi and Briony considerably torn up and out of the race, but the winner, Laura Kenny, had plenty to say about the safety standards at the race after seeing her fellow cyclists crash out. She urged the management and the sport overall to do better and to make a bigger effort to prevent incidents like this from happening again. When you have a handful of cyclists in the hospital after 3 consecutive nasty incidents, you know something is wrong. The 5-time British Olympic champion said that the crashes were getting worse in recent years, especially as the competition speeds were increasing and there were more extreme positions, making it easier for riders to crash. She specifically brought up the pursuit positions, as all 3 incidents were caused by one rider getting too close to the next one's back wheel, clipping it, and causing them to lose their balance on the angled track. Laura pleaded for the Union Cycliste Internationale to take notice and put a cap on the dangerous pursuit positions. She even declared that the barriers around the track track should have been higher because Matt's crash was dangerous not only for him, but for the audience as well. Ugly accidents might just be a cycling tradition at this point, as she went on to say that Matt's accident was the third time she'd seen someone go over the top at a velodrome. With spectators' lives on the line, 3 times is 3 times too many. While Matt was relatively unharmed and cracking jokes after his accident, Laura thinks that if there were screens on the top of the barrier, the little girl might have been safer. But luckily enough, the area that he crashed into wasn't full, saving a lot more people from the carnage. Laura also said that the crash scared her so much that she actually considered withdrawing from her own race. But in a horrifying turn, she ended up not being injured, even though her fellow cyclists were. On a bigger scale, Australia is leading a group of countries that are pushing for better safety measures and precautions in cycling events after Matt's crash. Oz Cycling Performance Director Jesse Korf mentioned that he had been gathering country representatives to present a united front to the UCI to have a better chance of bringing about change. Naturally, crashes are to be expected in a sport like cycling, but they shouldn't be so dramatic that they shoot you over the barrier and into the audience. Korf went on to say that this wasn't a one-off incident and that it had happened before, as Laura also mentioned. The director also said that it wasn't completely impossible to take better precautions. He brought up the example of ice hockey, where there is a plexiglass wall around the rink to protect the spectators. At any rate, it's a conversation worth having. He also compared cycling to Formula 1 driving, except with the former, you don't have a car to protect you, and you're not driving on an angled velodrome. But his point was that Formula 1 was in the same place around a decade ago in terms of driver safety and equipment, meaning cycling has a lot of room for improvement too. Despite Matt Glaetzer and Josh Duffy both getting caught in the Truman accident, Korf reassured everyone that the team morale was high and they're ready to attack the upcoming events with full effort. Moving on, here's the latest from Birmingham 2022. First, one of Australia's stars might be out. The world champion in javelin, Kelsey Lee Barber, was one of Australia's best bets to bring home gold at the Games. However, the athlete has tested positive for COVID-19, setting the Aussie team back quite a bit. According to Athletics Australia, she's still asymptomatic and will be competing, making her the first big example of the Games' controversial COVID rules, which state that each nation is responsible for their own athletes in regards to COVID. Plus, the Games gave us a royal viral moment. The most expected faces you can see at the Commonwealth Games are obviously the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, but their daughter Charlotte was the real showstopper. In typical English fashion, the 7-year-old princess gained a bit of a reputation for being cheeky after sticking out her tongue at her uncle's wedding to Meghan Markle, but she's brought the look back, making hilarious faces and cheering at the top of her lungs in an adorable moment that both made her parents dissolve into laughter and went viral on social media. And lastly, a failed background check led to a quick drop. The British rapper Pa Salieu was scheduled to perform at the closing ceremony for the Games, but was dropped instantly after some past details came to light. The 24-year-old Coventry local was arrested for taking part and getting violent in a mass brawl where his friend was knifed to death. Even though he was acquitted, he was still found guilty of possessing a weapon and a second count of violent disorder that he admitted to. That's a wrap for this video. How did you react to the crashes? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.